And actually, to your point about Section 6, the mobility rights, that's what, that meme on the internet of like what radicalized you? This is what radicalized me. In the summer of 21, we were going to visit my wife's family in PEI. And that was right when they were doing this was before the vax passes, but they were doing the maritime bubble.
Oh God!
And do you
Like,
remember that?
how is that constitutional?
Yeah, it was nonsense, right? And
How
so
does
I
they
was
challenge that? Nobody.
exactly, and I wrote a big email, and maybe one day I'll find it. I wrote a huge email to the to the premier, and I don't
Good.
think it got answered, but but I laid out my rationale of like this seems to go against Section 6. This seems to go against this and that. And what they were making you do at the time was uh essentially you were supposed to upload a picture of your vaccination records to this website that they created that had a database that was being hosted somewhere offshore. Like it wasn't even a government site. And
Awesome.
I put all that into the email. I'm like, how am I supposed to know that? Like, even if I was on board with this, which I'm not, how am I supposed to know that any information I upload to this site remains secure? It's not leaked somewhere else. This is not a like a .gc or whatever .pei website. Yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess, and like no one cared. They just
I
did
don't
it.
know if they cared, because this is what I'm learning the more I'm involved is I think maybe sometimes they didn't even know.
Mm,
So, like, you might have brought up some points. They're like, oh yeah, where are we storing this? If you look around, and I don't mean to be disrespectful or disparaging, but kind of look at some of the people that are elected officials. Again, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but if most regular Canadians, and I'd say most regular Canadians, don't really appreciate and understand these things, which is fair. Like we already talked about, this is not in their daily wheelhouse. Do you really expect elected officials that kind of have the same background to automatically know all these things when they get elected, particularly at a local level? That's what I'm learning a lot about, because right now there's been a lot of talk about the human rights and having washrooms like unisex or something. I really think that people in small communities don't understand. So they're like, oh, we don't want to be sued, so let's just do this. And that
right.
the more I'm involved, the more I'm understanding that's actually the case. So you might have brought something to their attention that they didn't really know about, but privacy rights is something that possibly they didn't even consider.
Crazy.
So it's, I think elevating the conversation is so important.
So one thing I've noticed is there is a trend kind of in academia for hyper specialization, where people will take 6 years and they'll just dive deep and they'll be an expert in this one tiny little field. But if you go anywhere outside of that, they're functionally blind to how that interacts. Yeah. And I think you get a little bit of that with certain politicians, that they know their area super well, but we're lacking some there's a term called deep generalists. These are people who have a very deep practical sense of how the world works. I feel like if we had a few more of those in politics, that would just help glue things together. It would help kind of get people out of their silos. Because I think the deferring to experts are like, well, it's like, I don't know enough to even like do a little bit of critical thinking. So you defer it to somebody else, and there's no like checking up on it. There's no accountability. There's no like, you 100% trust that this one random expert came to a certain conclusion. Like, well, what's the rationale in that? Like, how do we make sure that they're not just off because of their own biases? So we need more of this crosstalk.
It's incredibly important. And I think that's a detriment to what we see and what's gone on. And I think that extends of not just politics, and I hadn't really thought about it in politics, but I think you're spot on. But in science and in law, I see, like, we saw this during COVID, again, going back to that, it was, if you weren't an immunologist, then you can't talk. And the immunologist is like, I don't know, the epidemiologist should be the one we're asking. The epidemiologist is like, I'm not a vaccinologist. The vaccinologist is like, no, it's public health, and who, like, that's, if you actually look at what happened, there was a lot of that. And if a lay person was in any of those, but the experts were pointing fingers at each other as well. And that's why I think you didn't see too many lawyers jumping up and taking these on, because these were incredibly complicated, high profile public issues as well, but very specialized too. So a lot of people are specialized in their practice. So why would they take away from their comfort and knowledge and then jump into something different? So I think that's across the board that's causing problem, unless you're a tradesperson that is supposed to be doing, maybe if you're an electrician, you shouldn't be jumping into plumbing. I think that's appropriate, but I think having a bit, I suspect an electrician can give you some good guidance on a plumbing, whereas in law, you almost don't. It's like, not my area, not my specialty, ask somebody else. And I don't think that's helpful. Like, then we don't build a house if nobody knows anything, with that same kind of analogy.
Yeah, it feels like it maybe has to do with the stakes and the whole CYA aspect of it, maybe from a law perspective. But it's funny you say that, because I was going to say we need more general contractors in the government rather than drama teachers. But